Welcome to the EV Powered Podcast. I'm Matt Allan.
And I'm Richard Alvin. So, Matt, as we spoke about last week, directly after we recorded last week's podcast, I went to the Farnborough International Air Show. So that makes this issue, it's going to be about planes, no trains, a few cars, and also things that float as well, because we're going to be talking about boats. So, without further ado, Farnborough. Firstly, I have to admit, dear listener, I'm a bit of an idiot. Because last week I said that China were not advancing in the aerospace space, but that Europe was the dominant player. Europe aren't the dominant player whatsoever in aerospace because America are. You only needed to look at the Farnborough Air Show for that to be very evident, in so much as every single state actually had a stand at the show. And most of the states actually had a stand larger than the country, a country. The UK was slightly different because we had a whole, being the host, we actually had a very large presence there. And also in the States, Florida really do lead the way in aviation. So apologies to America. Our cousins across the pond, you take back your mantle as being the destination for global aerospace. Also, talking about things that were at the show, I mean, eVTOL, so electric vehicle takeoff and landing aircraft, really were the talk of the show. Wisk, owned by Boeing, are actually doing, or in the process of finalising, an autonomous 4-seater flying taxi.
Right, okay.
They're doing testing at the moment in New Zealand. And then you've got Joby, which is another very large drone-like means of transport. And they've got 1,500 engineers, including some from Toyota, actually working to bring their eVTOL to life. They're based in California, but they've also got offices in Santa Cruz, DC, and Munich in Germany. So, you know, this really is starting to take off at a pace. Sustainable fuel was also a big talking point at the show, there was a very odd and interesting new bespoke aircraft being developed by Radia. It's called a Windrunner, and it's actually for delivering those huge onshore wind turbines to wherever they actually are needed to be. And they only really need about a 30-foot runway actually at the wind farm site itself. So should America actually adopt onshore wind farms, and I have to say I'm not entirely sure if this company is actually gonna bear fruit, but we shall see. But anyway, and also talking about other things that are related, I stumbled upon something on Instagram this week. Amancio Ortega, he's the Spanish billionaire that owns Zara, has just taken possession of a new yacht.
Nice for him, yeah.
It's a cool $300 million. It's a 92-meter yacht, but the interesting thing is it's a fully hybrid vessel. It's got dual 560 kilowatt engines and 1 megawatt of lithium-ion batteries. It does cost a cool 25 million to run. So let's just hope that sales per year, yeah. Let's just hope that sales in Zara don't start to dry up. And also, you know, last month we went to the electric boat show, so you don't actually have to have millions to go electric with your boat. Yeah, let's assume you've got a small fishing boat or a rib. There was actually a Pillar lithium-ion battery outboard motor, £1,500. And it was good for 20 miles. You just bring it inside, charge it up with the USB lead, off you go.
Yeah. Handy for just pottering about in a loch somewhere.
Exactly.
Catching fish.
Yeah. But Matt, you've been doing some research on this, and there's apparently low emission zones at sea.
Yeah. It made me laugh. I was reading about this enormous £300 million hybrid yacht. And one of the things I've read pointed out that it would be ideal for use in low emission zones out in the sea. And apparently these are a thing. And you laugh initially, and then actually think about it. it's areas like the Galapagos and these sort of unspoiled beauty spots that don't want dirty, great big diesel boats chuntering about, spewing fumes everywhere. Actually, it's not a million miles away from the on-road low emission zones that we've got already. So when you start to think about it, it's not a bad idea. I mean, there's an argument that perhaps you shouldn't be taking your 92-meter gin palace anywhere near the Galapagos Islands in the first place, but that's not for us to discuss. But yeah, it's one of those things. On the surface, sounds ridiculous, and you think about it. Well, actually, maybe there's a point. And also on the hybrid thing, entirely separate. But yeah, um, all these massive multi-billionaires with their yachts and things. They're not the only ones playing the hybrid game. Obviously, I don't know if you know or not, but His Majesty's Navy is also got into the hybrid game, and the HMS Queen Elizabeth class boats are both hybrids. So the new aircraft carriers are doing their little bit for the environment as well.
Excellent. I mean, the King, Prince Charles, as he was then, is very keen on environmental matters. You know, his Aston Martin was converted decades before other people were thinking about that to run on biofuel. And I saw something this week as well in the press that he's having the Bentley. He's the Bentley bespoke that was given to the Queen by Bentley. He's having that converted later this year, I think, to equally run in a more sustainable environmental way. So I can definitely see the King leading from the front when it comes to environmental things, and clearly he doesn't get involved in the minutiae of his navy, but it's good to see that the navy are, and I would presume the army, following suit in more environmental aspects. However, it is a slight concern sometimes when you also then see these huge, great big cruise liners, docking in wherever, Florida or other places of significant interest, pumping out millions of tons of CO2. And I think the stats are pretty amazing. One ship's annual emissions is equivalent to 12,000 cars.
Yeah, it's one of these things where it's easy. I think a lot of people get hung up, governments, media, everybody get hung up on we need to clean up road transport and get petrol and diesel cars off the road. And that's a really important thing. Yeah, we definitely do need to be reducing our road emissions. But it does feel slightly ironic where individuals are being told, well, you've got to change your car to something with low emissions. And then these giant cruise liners are pulling into Venice and places like that, pumping out thousands of tons of CO2 every year. And that's just not mentioned. We don't talk about that.
No. One such smaller boat that does actually emit no emissions is Candela. Candela partner with Polestar. It's got the same batteries as Polestar use, and it does close to 500 miles on a charge. So that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I think I was reading about that, and I think they reckoned it could get from their Swedish base across to the UK on a single charge without leaving you stranded in the middle of the North Sea. But it's an interesting. I think Candela also do commuter boats and tourist boats for sort of short ferry hops. They've been testing out in New Zealand with passenger sightseeing boats as well. And it's interesting that it's not just, we spend a lot of time talking about cars and trucks and vans and things, but it's not just those areas where there's innovation in trying to reduce emissions and come up with these zero emissions vehicles. We've got it in sightseeing boat industries and things as well. And as you say, with these drones and the sort of robo taxis and things, there's all sorts of areas that we're seeing battery power sort of start to take over.
Absolutely. And I think, the mood at Farnborough, for example, was most of these are going to be licensed and live within about 5 years. So, which is pretty impressive.
Yeah, absolutely.
And also boats are not just going from point A to point B, because this weekend just gone, the E1 series was in Monaco. And once again, Tom Brady's team were victorious in the Principality.
Yep. Yeah. I think they didn't manage to take a victory, did they? But they were there first or second place both races. actually.
Yeah, and it's quite impressive. Just the ownership structure within E1 series as well. With Rafa Nadal and some of the other really
Yeah.
high-profile sports people, Checo Perez as well, actually being invited to take part. And I don't think they're just. All right, Checo was slightly busy with matters elsewhere this weekend.
Other
He wasn't
things
there.
to think of.
But I know Tom Brady was there and has been there at every single race. So they are very keen involved as well. So which is good to see. But also, going back to more things with wheels, um, HGVs, whilst they're not really being electrified because well, some are, but because of range issues, etc. Toyota are making quite a big splash, literally now with hydrogen.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing actually. There seem to be two strands, and this is one of these areas where actually, in passenger cars, it seems to be very much everybody's going down battery electric. That's the route. There are one or two sort of tinkering with hydrogen, but it's not seen as a short term or an immediate solution. With the HGVs, there seems to be much more that Toyota, as you say, are doing hydrogen. Mercedes and Volvo both looking at hydrogen, but also have fully electric HGVs on the roads already. Mercedes recently did the Rally of Britain, the A to Z Rally of Britain, with the e-Actros 600. Seemed to manage that absolutely fine, and they're using that as a sort of proof of concept, proving ground for this truck. But yeah, as you say, Toyota seem to be ignoring the electric side of it. They've gone down hydrogen for their HGVs, and they've just announced a new trial with Coca-Cola, which is basically going to see Toyota's hydrogen fuel cell trucks used on Coke's logistic runs in Europe. And that's building on Toyota have announced previous trials. So they started last year using these hydrogen HGVs to deliver parts between Toyota's factories around Europe. And Toyota's argument is that you get the zero emissions benefits of a fuel cell vehicle, because obviously this is, as I think as we talked about last week, it's not burning hydrogen. These are fuel cell vehicles that are converting hydrogen and oxygen into water, and one of the byproducts of that is electricity, which is how the powering it. So Toyota's argument is that we've got effectively clean energy that takes a fraction of the time to refuel HGVs, which, given the huge distances they do and the huge loads that they carry, Toyota's argument is that this is an advantage over a battery vehicle. I think the companies that are building the BEV HGVs might counter that with these megawatt chargers that are starting to be rolled out, that are effectively, it's 1,000 kilowatt chargers, so 3 times the most powerful chargers on the market, that actually you're going to get HGVs that can charge as quickly as a regular passenger car, despite having these enormous batteries. But I think it's an interesting one just to see the different angles that people are taking, different approaches, and how there's still room in sort of in a zero emissions environment going forward. There's room for different solutions, and it'll be interesting to see how these trials with Toyota pan out, and also how people like Mercedes and Volvo, who have their big electric HGVs, how that goes in the future.
Yeah, there's actually a test base for these 1,000-watt chargers actually in Oxford. I mean, there's no ability to actually charge at 1,000 watts with any vehicle at the moment, but the technology is there from the charger standpoint, which is good. That's probably quite a good place to break. Let's go and pay some bills, and also come back with an interview that I did with Wisk, the Boeing-owned eVTOL company. As you can see, the future is definitely going to be in the air. Right, so Matt, going back to cars for a little bit, you saw something in the media today about grants and the impact that grants could or may be having actually on people's buying habits.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. It was a piece of research done by CarWow, which effectively said that about half of the people they polled, it was the usual ask a few thousand British drivers, what do they think? And about half the people polled reckoned that the new Labour government needs to introduce some sort of grants to stimulate the private EV market. There's been a lot of chat about fleet dominating the sales, and more needs to be done to get private buyers into electric cars. So this study looked at whether people are in favour of grants or not. And about half of people, in fact, about 58%, I think it was, said that they'd like to see grants on new electric cars. And it's one of these things that leaves me in two minds every time it comes up. And it has come up before. Obviously, we had the plug-in car grant before, and that started off offering £5,000 off the price of a car. It gradually got chopped down and chopped down to 1,500. And the government, when it scrapped it in 2022, reckoned that it had helped increase the number of EVs on the road by tenfold. And how much of that's actually down to the grant, how much of it is just consumer interest in EVs is hard to quantify. But I understand why people think being offered money off a car is a great idea. That's a surefire way to encourage people because suddenly it's cheaper. But you have to wonder, somebody who's looking at a 45 grand EV, a Kia EV6, a VW ID4, something like that, is being offered, say, £2,000 off that list price, actually going to swing their decision? And if they were looking at an equivalent petrol model, is the option of £2,000 off a list price really going to be that big a deal to them at that price point? And the other thing you have to consider is that 90%, more than 90% of all new vehicles are bought in finance. And a huge number of those are going to be PCP, they're going to be PCH, something like that. At which point, how important is the list price anyway? Everybody buying those cars is considering what the monthly payments are. So offering £2,000 off the top price, that doesn't have any effect on your monthly payments, does it? So would it be better in that situation perhaps to offer £2,000 deposit contribution instead? If you can say to people, rather than taking it from 45,000 down to 43,000 on paper, here's £2,000 to put towards your deposit, which actually will bring your monthly payments down. Is that a more effective use of the money?
But also, and I know Vauxhall are doing this with price parity, are we not getting to the point whereas it's as expensive to actually manufacture a battery of, a BEV, as it is an ICE? Battery prices are coming down, almost daily. There's more in the supply chain, etc. now, so they're clearly able to make them cheaper. If Vauxhall can do it, why can't everyone else do it?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think Vauxhall have been quite clever with that because this is the thing. We're now in this period where we've switched from early EV adopters who were people who deliberately sought out an electric car, and were willing to pay a bit more for it. We're moving into this, what the SMMT calls it's the mass mainstream adoption, which is people who they need a new car. The time has come to get a new car, and they're going to go out and look for what they can get. And at that point, yeah, you need this price parity that the Vauxhall have managed to do. They've done it on, it's on monthly payments. This isn't top line cash list prices, but it's on the monthly payments. You can now get a Corsa electric for the same monthly payment as the 1.2 petrol. And then I saw something else talking about the running costs, and they're substantially cheaper for that particular car. And it's at that point, that price parity, I think, yeah, is something that's more likely to attract buyers to an EV if they can look and they say, well, it doesn't cost me anything more, my running costs are less, I'm doing my bit to reduce your tailpipe emissions. I think that's more the way to go. And why other people don't do it, I don't know. I think perhaps their finances are set up differently, or perhaps they just haven't cottoned onto it as quickly as Vauxhall has.
Yeah. The other thing, though, I mean, with the ZEB targets, etc., that we've got going on, is there not an argument, and I don't know how you would go about doing this, but for incentivizing, providing grants or whatever within the used car market as well?
Yeah,
because if you then stimulate the used car sector as well, that's equally going to be putting more battery battery vehicles actually in than the new cars.
yeah. I think there's almost two sides to it, because we talk a lot about trying to get people into new electric cars, and because of the ZEV mandate and things, there is this focus on, well, we need to get people into new electric cars. But if you look at the car market as a whole, the used car market is far, far bigger than the brand new car market. And if we're talking more broadly about trying to get people into EVs, not specifically into new EVs, if we're talking about just trying to get people to opt for a cleaner model, then you have to look at the used car market. I think last year there were 1.9 million new car sales and 7.2 million second-hand transactions. So it gives you an idea of the difference in scale of the two markets. So yeah, really, if we want to be getting people into EVs, regardless of brand new or whatever, the second-hand market is the way to go. And there are ways to incentivize that. I know in Scotland you can get I think it's an interest-free loan, which you can then put towards buying a second-hand EV. And whether or not, I don't have figures to know how effective that is, but something like that makes EVs more affordable to the majority of buyers who aren't buying brand new, that it seems like a no-brainer to me. And I think if there's no indication that the Labour government is planning on throwing any money at incentivizing EVs, but if it was to, then you think that maybe, yeah, the second-hand market is the way to go. You help stimulate that, and that of course then helps stimulate the new market as well. As demand goes up, then it all trickles down.
Yeah, I think given what Rachel Reeves has said in the last 24 hours or so, blaming Jeremy Hunt for leaving no money in the piggy bank, then I think she'll definitely be not incentivizing any electric vehicles, whether they be new or old. It's all about new. The Kia EV pricing has just been announced.
Yep. Yeah, it's been a fairly quiet week this week because we're heading into summer holidays. Everyone's packing up. But yeah, Kia announced yesterday the pricing for the EV3, which is going to start at about five or under £33,000. And the EV3 is it's their little EV. I mean, effectively, it's a replacement for the Soul, and it's going to be competing against things like the Peugeot 2008, Jeep Avenger, Volvo EX30, and the Smart #1 are a couple of the cars that Kia sort of highlighted. And actually, with that announcement, I think a few people were a bit disappointed. I think there was a bit of online chat that perhaps people thought it would come in under 30. And I think that was probably always a bit optimistic. But actually, even at 33, it looks like pretty good value. I don't have all the stats and specs in front of me, but looking at it, it's the cheapest of the lot. I think anything cheaper than that, you're getting into, it's an either MG4 or you're getting into much smaller vehicles. The EV3 it's a decent sized family SUV. I was out looking at it a couple of months ago, and it's a lot of space inside, which it gives it. In fact, the Soul was big enough. This is a bit bigger again, without treading on the toes of the Nero EV. It's bigger than a few of the other cars out there, but it's undercutting everything. And it's, in terms of the technical specs, it's still outperforming most of similarly priced cars as well. I think they're doing two battery versions. There's the small battery, which is, I want to say 54 kilowatt hours, and that's going to do 260, 270 miles on a charge for less than £33,000. And then you spend an extra £3,000 and you can get the 81 kilowatt hour battery. So that's the same battery that's in the new EV6 and the Ioniq 5 and things like this, which is, for a relatively small car, that's a big battery, and that's going to offer 370 miles of range. And when you look at what the comparable cars are doing, I think the Volvo does about 300, the Peugeot and the Jeep and things do 270 with their bigger batteries. And at 35,000, it's undercutting the Volvo by about £5,000. It's undercutting the Peugeot as well. So it's an interesting thing. I think Kia have proved that they know what they're doing with EVs. I think theirs are some of the best on the market, and they're some of the most popular. And I think the EV3 is just going to be a progression of that. I think that's one I can see that having a huge impact, especially given that it's £6,000 cheaper than the Soul was, as well. So they're talking about bringing prices down for what you're getting and for what it's replacing. Actually, Kia's doing that with the EV3, I think.
Yeah, you definitely are getting a lot of bang for your buck, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah.
Talking about that, Audi are just about to unveil their new A6 e-tron.
A6, yeah, yeah. It's based on the same platform as the Q6, so we can guess quite a lot. But I mean, I'm quite excited about this because I've always loved the A6, and now we're getting an electric one, and it's another electric estate car to go along with the likes of the BMW i5 Touring, and sucker for an estate car. I would have an estate car over an SUV any day of the week. So I'm really excited about this A6 and A6 Avant. But yeah, I think there's no word on pricing or anything like this, but we can expect it to be slightly more than an EV3, for instance. But you're looking at what the Q6 has. This is going to use the same PPE platform that the Q6 and the Porsche Macan use as well. So we're talking about probably cheap rear-wheel drive version with maybe 320 horsepower, perhaps I think probably around a 450 mile range. It's using the same battery as the Q6, but obviously it's lower. It's a bit slipperier, so it should manage to beat the Q6's range. And that's knocking on the door of 400 miles at the minute. Then above that, can expect a Quattro version because it's Audi. So they'll do a two-motor version. And presumably there'll be an S6 above that that'll be based on the same setup as the SQ6, which will be 500 plus horsepower and ridiculously quick. I'm intrigued to see whether we'll get an RS6 as well, e-tron, because Audi's got the tech there, and obviously with the Porsche setup, they'll be able to squeeze more juice out of it if they wanted to. I suspect if that comes, that'll be a couple of years down the line. But be keeping an eye out tomorrow to see exactly what this new A6 looks like.
Definitely exciting times, and and also they finally announced their entry into Formula One. They announced it a little while ago. Their entry into Formula One, but at least they've actually now started to firm up on some of those plans as well. So that would be good to see some of that trickle down from the German manufacturer from Formula One actually down into some of their road cars as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just touch upon something we talked about last week about Ford reusing names, etc. With the launch of the Capri. You've had some rumblings that might not be the only brand that they're looking to bring back.
Yeah, it's one of these things. There's nothing concrete anywhere, but I did spot somewhere earlier in the week that there are rumors the Fiesta name might be making a comeback as well. The Fiesta was killed off 2 years ago to make way for the Puma in the lineup and to make way in Cologne at the factory to build the Explorer. But it sort of signified the end of Ford's involvement in little cheap cars. But now there are rumblings that there is a bespoke small car platform that Ford's working on that could underpin a rival to the ID2 and the Skoda equivalent and the Seat equivalent of that. And it seems to make sense, given what Ford have said about reusing names and the heritage and the connections attached to these names, that the Fiesta name it'd be an obvious choice. If you're going to build a small, affordable Ford EV, you would use the Fiesta name, wouldn't you? Surely.
Oh, absolutely. But could we even see them reusing the KA name and bringing out a rival to a Citroen Ami or a Microlino, something like that?
I suppose they could. And I don't know how much love there really is for the Ford car. So it wouldn't be one that would appeal to me, but each to their own. But it's entirely possible. I don't know. I think Ford have been quite vocal in the past at saying that those days are behind them. But then if this Fiesta's an option, then even if we're not talking Citroen Ami levels of affordability, there's the C3 in cars like that and the Dacia Spring. There's space if Ford wanted to go that way, that they could compete in a market like that. I think Ford now fancies themselves as slightly more high end than that. I think they're clearly a mainstream manufacturer, but from what I've read, they seem to think that their interests lie higher up the food chain, if you like. They're going to leave that budget-friendly end to the Citroens and the Dacias and things like that.
And just before we wrap up for this week, Matt, what's all this about Renault and offering divorce guarantees?
Yeah, this is it. It's a brilliant piece of PR, frankly, from Renault. They've announced that they think the Scenic is such a good family car that it solves all the problems of in-car family arguments. That if you buy a Scenic and before the end of this year you end up getting divorced, you can give your car back and they will give you a full refund. There are terms and conditions here, there, and everywhere. I had a read of some of the small print, and you can't fake this one out. You've got to turn up with a divorce document saying, "Yep, my marriage is a disaster. Can I please have my money back?" But I can't see anybody doing it. But it's just a nice little trick by Renault to get some attention on the Scenic, which, in fairness, is a very good family SUV.
But on that note, thank you for listening. We'll be back with more next week, and please make sure that you like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
You can find more episodes of the Everything EV podcast on Spotify, Apple Music, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.